Oh, you set the bar high there with your meal planning time. I think I would add to that too is just so meal planning is to Iffy's point, it's like if you do it and you get it's hard sometimes to get started, but when you do and you get into a rhythm of it, it really is like one less thing to think about. And the stresses that parents have right now, like not having to think about what to make, is such a relief. It's like so much brain power that you can use for other things, right? But when I teach parents how to plan for when they have a picky eater or a child who's more of a selective eater, or just a child who has their preferences, and that's most kids, is also make a list. Like the first step, I have a workshop called Family Meal Planning Made Easy, and it's like how to plan a month of meals in 30 minutes. And what you do is you actually take I call the stoplight list of foods where you write down your child's green foods, like the foods that are the go foods, the foods they would eat 50% of the time or more. The yellow foods are the foods that they sometimes eat, and the red foods are the hard, like the no-goes. Make a list of the green and yellow foods. And if he was talking about meal planning, when you're thinking about before you buy things, making sure you're kind of going down the list of what your child likes and incorporating those one by one into the meal plan, trying to rotate, trying to make sure that you do not have the same foods repeated day after day or multiple times a day. Like there are some families where their kids get, an apple in the morning and for a snack or a granola bar. And I know sometimes when you have a limited food list, it's hard, but you'd be surprised how many foods your child has if you go through that effort. And that's one of the first steps I do with families, regardless of whether we're meal planning or just expanding their food list. It just helps you to see where your child's foods fall, and then also categorizing them based on the macronutrients. So what proteins do they eat? What carbohydrates do they eat? Like carbohydrate grain, and then carbohydrate fruit and veggie, and then snacks or dips is another one to actually have to separate. Anyway, so that's a little tip I would leave just to build on what if he was saying about meal planning, because I agree that it's an important one. And then okay. So what I, as someone who works with parents mostly that have kids that don't eat well, there's a lot of stress happening before the meal starts, during the meal, after the meal ends. Everyone's frustrated. And one of my biggest goals when I work with families, I always say to them when we start our coaching is, I know I'm going to give you what you want, which is to help your child expand their food list and grow your child's food list so they're eating more and so on. But I'm also going to give you what you need, and that is reassurance that you're doing the right things to help your child, not just for today or next week or what they eat this month, but actually for the long term. Because that's actually what's really important to me. And that part of that is injecting joy at the table. So there's so many layers of stress. 50% of people are stressed out on a daily basis. 1 to 2/3 of people are burnt out. And family life contributes to that, absolutely. And the research shows that parents are the highest stress demographic. So part of that stress is fueled by feeding the family and just the complexities. Like if you're making multiple meals for your family or to accommodate different preferences, if you're negotiating at the table, if your kid won't sit, like there's so many areas that stress can come in. And as a mom of a former picky eater who was on track to get a feeding tube because she was taking in so little, I totally get the layer of stress that is on top of that when you've got the pressure of you just want your child to eat. You don't want to send them to bed hungry. So the first thing I tell parents to do is to really make food fun and inject joy at the table. Find opportunities to make your kids laugh. And actually, the research shows that there's so much around happiness. We need to be happy, but that is such a grand goal. But when you think about joy, happiness and joy only really last for like 15 seconds, like through that like really big burst. So just think about, where can I inject moments of joy at the table? Because when you do, it'll be more fun for your kids. They will be more likely to stay at the table. They'll be more likely to come back again the next meal. But if the meal ends on a negative note, it's going to be a fight. right? They're like, oh gosh, dinner is such a drag. Mommy and daddy are just going to bug me to try something new, or, it's so we've really got to change their expectations around what dinner is and kind of and so on the making food fun, I found one way to do that when parents are like, how do I make food fun? Like I'm way too stressed out. I'm so busy. I just came home from work. I have no brain power to get creative. Then just think about the sensory system, right? Like think about life. The best moments in life are those that ignite the senses. So, like if you go to a hotel, you go to on a trip, a lot of it is all about how you're engaging, your senses are engaging with the environment, right? So, thinking about what your child is experiencing from a sensory perspective, because eating is the most complex task we do as humans. It's more difficult than learning to walk or talk. So, and if your child is not comfortable with the food from a sensory perspective, it is not going in their mouth. If they aren't willing to smell it, they're not eating it. If they're not willing to touch it, they're not putting that in their mouth. But if they engage with these foods, then they can learn how to like them. And so one thing I created, and I'll just show this really quickly, it's called the Curious Cookie food exploration map or food adventure map, and it takes your kids on a food journey through each of the sensory systems. And so you'll notice even just the language on it. So there's the lycometer. It looks like it's backwards right now, but it says, I like, what does it say? It says, I like it today, or I might like it tomorrow. So it's not, I don't like this, right? So this is the whole mat is about injecting positive language and getting your child to explore food step by step, and all of the imagery associated with each of the words help them so they can do it on their own. And kids just love checking things off. So by the time they get to the end, they're more likely, kids are trying foods they never would before. And because we're removing parents from the equation, we're removing control, we're giving our kids a sense of control, and we're making it fun. So that's one of the tips I would leave. And just one of the other things I was going to mention, but I could quickly wrap it in here, is that your own mental health. If you are stressed, you're starting the meal on a stressful note. The anxiety's high. When your kids are in fight, flight, when they're in survival mode, they're in fight, flight, or freeze mode, because the brain can't determine between whether they're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger or whether mommy just wants you to eat your green peas. So if you can manage your own stress, then that you can bring that joy to the table a lot easier by changing your own mindset. And a lot of that is just change the expectation for the meal. Instead of it's a good meal if my kid eats, it's a good meal if everyone's happy at the table. So those are 2 points I wanted to leave there. So if I'm going to pass it back to you.
That was really insightful, because as you were talking about it and I looked at the food map, it was like, yeah, that's kids for you. And something I always tell my patients is always remember that this process isn't about you. Take yourself out of the equation and just think about what is going through your child's mind, like the difficulties they're experiencing. I always like to liken picky eating to, especially for parents who are just about to start weaning, um, to getting a new job. When you get into a new office, it's a different experience. You're nervous, you're scared, you don't know what to expect. Even though you have the skills to deliver, it's a different place. And then maybe you came into the office and, it was pen and paper. That's how they work. And then 6 months into this new job, they say, nope, we're done with pen and paper. Everybody get out a computer, and that's how we're going to be doing things. I can guarantee you that if there was a workforce of 30 people, at least 10 of them are going to quit, not because they couldn't do the job, but because it was too sudden. Why are you just going to take my pen and paper away, And so likening that, thinking about that situation, and if that was you, and just know that that's what your child is experiencing. We're moving from such a huge difference to something all brand new. And your expectation is you just need to eat this. This is what's going to keep you healthy. This isn't what's going to work. And forgetting that it's all brand new to them and they really, really need your support by helping them understand. I always say that um, appetite is the only thing that we have that's inbuilt. Feeding is a skill that has to be taught. You have to teach your children how to eat, what to eat, where to eat, what it looks like to enjoy something, because that's not something that's innate. It doesn't come naturally to everyone. And so it's just listening to you, it just really brings it full circle that, yeah, we need to try and take our stress away as best as we can. I'm looking forward to when you talk about mental health, especially for families, because that's something that's so important. Um, and that's why I want to talk about the role of clinical nutrition. Um, every single kind of medical or health profession has a role to play. Always remember that nutrition is part of the multidisciplinary team. Yes, I like that concept, putting a cricket on your child's plate and expecting to eat it. I would need a cricket. So that makes a whole lot of sense, Danielle. But yes, talking about the clinical role of nutrition, nutrition in the health space and in the medical space has a lot of potential and benefits. It helps with sensory issues. It helps with children who are on different parts of the spectrum. It helps with children who are having growth issues. It helps with children who are having digestive issues. It's such a major role in nutrition in the life of your child that it's essential to always seek out professional help, right? I always say never find yourself going through a challenge and think you're the only one who's been there. We've all been there. We've experienced it. The difference between us and you is we just have a little more education and have worked with more experiences to help you solve and have more tools to help you solve it. We're able to take the confused puzzle pieces and put them together better for you such that it makes more sense, right? And that's the role that clinical nutrition plays. We're not interested in how many multivitamins that your child needs to take. At least for me, I never look at that as my major role. My role is to teach you how to use food to ensure that your child's functioning at the optimal capacity, having optimal health with food. And it's never special food. I don't believe in the concept of special food. Everyone just has food that works for them, right? I might not like something eaten a certain way, not just because it doesn't work well for my digestive system, and that's okay. I don't have to go looking for special something else. I just need to replace the nutrients of that food that I cannot have. And that's the joy of food. There are so many nutrients in so many different things that thank God there's not one food that if your child doesn't eat that, they're going to miss out on 1,000 things. One of the things I like to use an example is milk. Um, Milk is a powerful nutrient. It's essential. It's really important, but everyone can't have it, and that's okay. Now, are they going to miss out on some essential nutrients if they can't have milk? No, they won't, because we'll be able to find other foods that could provide those nutrients that they're not able to get from milk or from dairy. And so that's one of the most basic ways I like to look at nutrition. It's vast, it's exciting, it's important, but understanding that there are conditions that food can solve and food can heal, that's why the clinical role is so important for everyone to understand. Over to you, Daniel.
Great. Yeah. So the other thing I was going to talk about was it's funny, we have to make notes, right? Because we got so much on our mind. I'm like, what was the other thing? So much. I get so passionate about this topic that I kind of get easily, kind of go down different paths. But so in the spirit of kind of with the nature of meal times, this is going to be a quick one, so you guys will like this, is not only are we trying to make the meal time an environment where we're removing the stress so your child does not go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? So fight is, no, I'm not eating this, yuck. Flight is running away from the table and doing circles. You can't get your child to eat. And freeze is they just sit there and don't touch anything. So those are all signs of your child going into responding to survival mode, basically. So what we can do is we want to look for ways to help your child feel like they can be successful at meal times. Because if they feel like, oh, mommy and daddy are only happy if if I eat something, or if I try new food, or I clean my plate, then that, number one, it feels daunting. So they're less inclined to want to come to the table. Meals feel like a drag. And also, that stuff kind of carries with us into our adulthood. I don't know about anybody else, but I have what you call clean plate syndrome, or I'm part of the clean plate club because my parents said there's people starving somewhere in the world and you need to eat everything on your plate. But it's interesting because they would put the food on my plate, so they would just be guessing at how much I needed. So when we put food on our kids' plate, they may have had enough protein for the day. They may have had, they maybe have not moved as much as the previous day and don't need as many calories yet. We're just guessing at what they need, and that can mess with their internal self-regulation. So having help your child feel like they can be successful and don't use how much food they eat as a marker for success. If they engage with a new food, like, using the principles of the curious cookie mat, if they do something that's sensory with the food, they touch a food they've never touched before, they put it on their plate, they say something positive, they don't say yuck, they sit at the table for an extra few minutes, acknowledge those little wins and celebrate those. So your child's like, oh, wait, I don't have to eat for mommy and daddy to be happy with me. Then they're more likely to come next time. And now the mealtime, now they look forward to meal times. Now it's less stressful. Now they're sitting longer. The longer they sit, the more their appetite builds. It all is a positive cycle that we can create. Now, how I got a 5-year-old in here. So part of it too is helping your child leave on a successful note. So end meals on a successful note where it's very distracting. So instead of, sometimes meals end and like everyone's fighting with each other because your child didn't eat, they're going to go to bed hungry, they're asking for a snack instead of dinner, or they want dessert. Instead, find a way to end the meal with a success so that everyone is smiling in the end. They have a positive memory of how that meal went versus everyone leaving and wanting to pull your hair out. So your second. So the first one was making food fun and creating opportunities for your child to learn to like foods. And the second tip is helping your child feel successful at the table. And I'll pass it back to you, Iffy.